Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Good afternoon if you're joining us from the United Arab Emirates. My name is Danny Seabright, President of the US-UAE Business Council. We are honored this morning in the United States to host this last webinar in our series of Pivot as a result of COVID-19, interviews with key prominent UAE, US government and business leaders. Today, we're honored to have on the screen on the webinar, Mr. Andrew Bunn, Vice President of Sales for the US at Emirates Airline, and Mr. Vincent Frangona, Vice President of Americas at Etihad Airways. These are the two key UAE airlines providing service to the United States and the world from the United Arab Emirates, from Dubai, and from Abu Dhabi as their respective hubs. We've been hit very hard in the travel industry, the hospitality industry by COVID-19, and it was important to us at the Business Council to have our two leading airlines on here in early August to talk about current conditions on flying back and forth between the US and the UAE and the region and the world. The airlines have undergone amazing activities and taken extraordinary steps to make flying safe and to provide service, get it back up and running for important business and travel, cargo travel, and of course, leisure travel to the extent possible. This morning, we are expecting over 300 participants on our webinar. We're currently at 200 logged in, and we have more joining. I want to turn the panel over, the speakers over to the speakers to speak here in a moment. I just want to say thank you to all the US states that have economic development offices and trade development offices that have joined us. We have Utah, Missouri, Mississippi, Florida, among others who are with us today. And we have businesses from all over the United States and the UAE, our council members and our key leading partners. We appreciate your interest. We appreciate giving you this opportunity to get an update, to receive an update from our valued partners. And with that, if I could turn it over first to Mr. Andrew Bunn, who will provide a few minutes of overview from Emirates, and then we will do the same with Mr. Frangona from Etihad. Andrew, over to you. Good morning. You are in New York City. Andrew, thank you for coming into the office and joining us from New York.
Good morning. Good morning, Danny. Thank you very much. Thank you, and thanks to your team also for arranging this morning. Vincent, best regards to you and to everybody who has joined the call this morning. A sincere and warm thank you, and a belated Eid Mubarak to our guests and our friends in the UAE. So, Danny, listen, it's a great opportunity. You said how long? I think 5 or 6 minutes. Probably we could fill several hours with what's happened over the last few months. I've lost count of the number of times I've heard unprecedented and uncharted territories, but it is as simple as that. The aviation industry, as with many, has been through the most, I think, dramatic of changes and impact that we have ever seen, and certainly we've been learning on the go. It's really been a case for us and to use that well-worn phrase, it's been a journey. It's been a journey over the last 4 or 5 months for sure, from where we were and then when the pandemic hit, to very significant operational changes, very significant customer care and customer support requirements in terms of tickets and bookings that were in the system that needed to be refunded or rebooked. We put a lot of policies in place to try and either take care of the refunds as quickly as we could, or even to hold tickets open for up to 760 days to try and give as much comfort as possible to people in a very difficult situation. So we're really very much at the beginning in support mode, in care mode, in dealing and trying to communicate. It's all been so much about communication over the last few months, communicating directly with our customers through all of our direct channels, communicating with our trade partners, our corporate partners, business partners in general. And the story has changed on a daily basis. And I have huge admiration for my operational colleagues, my colleagues in network planning, my colleagues in marketing who are changing operations and trying to change the message and adjust communication and keep keep us up to date and so that we can keep our business partners up to date throughout the process. And that has been the majority of what we've been doing. So it's very much operational and care, and that has continued, and that continues to this day. But of course, as time went on, we started to look at operations and what this might mean, even whilst the aircraft were grounded, what this might mean in terms of our protocols on board, aircraft cleaning, cabin crew protocols, services on board, services on the ground, how we would adjust our ground services, our operations in general, what this might mean, and continually trying to communicate that as well. And then this became, as we developed that message and the customer journey message, and focusing always on safety and security, and trying to ensure that we were maximizing the comfort, or maximizing the assurances for the customer, minimizing concerns. And as that was happening, very much about how the operations might look, how the network might look when borders start to open, getting aircraft back in the sky, opening up the gateways. In the US in particular, we have four gateways open now. We aim to have more open before long. Our commitment to the USA is very significant, has been for many years. So we were very keen, and we were lobbying locally, of course, to ensure that we get the aircraft in the sky. And now we're able to, we've got the JFK and Chicago, LA in place, Boston coming on the 15th of August. And we hope more to come as well. So it's also, whilst the care is going on, whilst all the protocols are in place and ensuring that we have those across the board, it's also about developing the network and having a commercial conversation. And that's really fantastic as well, that we can talk about Dubai, for example, Dubai being open, and really doubling down on that message and trying to ensure that we're supporting our home market in the UAE in general, which has, I think, done a fantastic job as far as this situation is concerned. And trying to have some good old-fashioned commercial conversations. I mean, this is ultimately what we want to do. As I say, huge admiration for our operational colleagues and the network planning guys, and they really do a great job in tough circumstances. But we want to sell, we want people on board, and we want to have good old-fashioned commercial conversations. So it's been, as they say, it's been a journey, Danny. But we're not out of it for sure, but at least some light at the end of the tunnel. And as I say, we hope to have some more announcements in terms of operations soon.
Andrew, thank you very much for that. Much appreciated. I neglected to say at the start of the webinar that we will be taking Q&A. You can use the Q&A function. You can use the chat function. Please, to our guests listening, watching, please send us any questions you might have. I have some prepared ones that I'm going to posit to our friends here in a moment. But I want to next turn it over to Vince Frangona, who's in Chicago, and also in the office and working, trying to get Etihad's operations in the States back up to par. Vince, over to you. Please give us an update from your perspective.
Well, good morning, Danny. Thank you, Andrew, and thank you everyone for joining. To say it's been emotional over the last few months is a bit of an understatement. I think the one thing about aviation is that everybody who has worked in aviation and continues to do so, we're well versed in dealing with adversity. It doesn't really matter what takes place around the world, whether it's pandemics, whether it's political, economical, wars, bad weather. We're used to dealing with things that go against us. This current situation is in a very, very different league. I think if you look back at key events that have taken place that have affected aviation previously, 9/11 is a good example. There are things that take place after these events, after these situations, that then do become how we normally travel. I was on a recent panel with a senior member of a big airport architecture firm, and he described sort of his life and the events after 9/11 as then becoming the theater of security, and quite rightly has described this as being now the theater of cleanliness and the theater of health. And I think, we've all received plenty of communications from, not just from airlines, but from hotels, from other organizations, about who's the cleanest, who's the most sanitized, who is the safest. And the key thing here is that, you know, like Emirates, Etihad has always had a key focus on safety, on cleanliness, on the well-being of guests. And communication is very key during a situation like this, whether it is about the network and what's happening with our guests flying and flights, or it's actually specifically about them as individuals, them with their families and their experience of traveling with Etihad from end to end. So when we talk about communication, it's about authentic communications. How do we actually put the right messaging out that not only puts the customer at ease, that gives them full insight into what we're doing to be fully prepared to keep them safe from end to end, but also be authentic with that communication by way of saying, you know, we're not just going to talk about it, but what we talk about, you will see. And, you know, we've seen lots of stories about great communication, but then possibly when passengers are traveling on other carriers, that they're not seeing those things coming to fruition. So it's really important that we're looking at the whole end-to-end process. If I take a step back, like most airlines, we stopped the majority of our flying at the end of March based on government requirements and government closures. We have seen some flying since then. A lot of cargo flying. We've done a lot of cargo business across the world to a lot of our existing destinations, but also to some new destinations. Into Cuba, most recently, we operated a cargo service, for example. But it's also given us some time to actually take a step back and look at our business as a whole. As our CEO regularly gives an overview, we've been in the gym for a couple of years already. So when this pandemic hit, it probably didn't hit us as hard as most other airlines in terms of allowing us to adapt quickly, to be fluid in our approach. And a good example of this is the fact that when all of our aircraft were on the ground, we used it as an opportunity to give all aircraft a full refresh, changing carpets, changing seat covers, changing seat backs. So ultimately, we have probably the youngest, or one of the youngest fleets out there already. When it comes back to full service flying, to a fuller network, for guests coming back to Etihad and returning on our aircraft, it will feel like they're getting on brand new aircraft again. So minor adjustments, fixing in-flight entertainment, to actually bringing forward some of the maintenance programs that are due on the schedule for the aircraft, that's put us in a much stronger position to come out of this. And that's ultimately the thing. When you look at this situation, how do you come out of this stronger than you went into it? And there are ways of doing that. In terms of our flying right now, we have restarted similar routes to what Andrew described. We've got 4 days a week out of JFK, 4 days a week out of Washington, DC, out of Dulles. 2 days a week out of Dulles and 4 days a week out of Chicago. In terms of North America, we're also operating a 4-day-a-week schedule out of Toronto as well. LA is the remaining route. We continue to monitor this situation, the opportunity to bring LA back into the fold. As yet, there is no date for restart for LA. So ultimately, what is the key goal here for us? It's to encourage customers to come back to flying, but in the right way and for the right reasons. Ultimately, the goal here is to put people's minds at rest that traveling on Etihad is safe and that we do care about their well-being. So yes, we are safe. Yes, we've always been sanitized, but actually, how do we bring the customer's well-being to the forefront? And that's why we've introduced the Etihad Wellness Ambassador Program, or the Etihad Wellness Program, which is really, it covers everything from start to finish. So we have a 24/7 specially trained unit based in Abu Dhabi, who are contactable via email, via web chat, and they are specially trained in all of our protocols for wellness and for hygiene, what's going to happen from end to end. So it's for passengers who haven't yet booked, to give them some peace of mind, some confidence in traveling. And then that goes throughout the travel process. So we're working hand in hand with Abu Dhabi Airports Company, with ADAC, to ensure that that wellness program continues through check-in, through passenger screening, through departures. And then, of course, one of the most important areas is on board the aircraft, where we have specially designated crew members on board who've been specially trained in all of the protocols. They're a point of contact in designated PPE. and are there not just for our guests on board to answer any queries and deal with any situations on board, but also as a point of contact for the rest of our crew as well. And they're as the focal point for Etihad Wellness on board.
Vincent, thank you very much. We've generated a number of questions here, which I'm going to entertain in a moment. But a couple of things I want to talk about or focus on, if I could, first. Just for our listeners to just a very quick by the numbers review. Andrew, you first, and then Vincent. What routes do you have open now from the U.S.? How many per week? And anything you can say about any that you see opening in the very near term within the next month. First you, Andrew, and then Vincent, just to give a very succinct review for our listeners.
Well, okay. Well, we're currently JFK, we're LA, we're Washington, DC, and we're Chicago. Twice daily Chicago, twice daily Washington, DC, LA, 4 times weekly from the 2nd of August, and JFK daily. There are some anomalies, I guess you could say, and some operational adjustments. So it's always best to check with your travel agent, with Emirates.com, check the schedules, because there are operational, even today with the storms, entirely unrelated to anything else. There are operational changes. So we would always advise that. We have, as I may have mentioned, Boston coming back online on the 15th of August. All at 777 operations at the moment. Again, that's a developing story with regards to the aircraft type, the aircraft size. These are generally related to the feasibility of the route operations, whether or not the demand demands a bigger aircraft, whether or not from a financial perspective with the route profitability it makes sense. So these are all the considerations you would take into account. So Boston will come back on, and then we're hopeful in September that we'll have a number of other gateways that will come back online at the beginning of September. This is developing news, and again, everything is, as people continue to say, to use another one of the well-worn cliches and phrases, everything is fluid. What we're trying to do is make sure that we're giving as much clarity as possible to our trade partners to ensure that we're giving not only the operations that are out of the US, but also what gateways, what connections are available through Dubai. So trying to make sure that we're really giving clarity on all of the routes that are available, whether it's into the UAE or whether it's beyond the UAE. So trying to make sure that that's up to date. It is a developing story, but very happy to see that we've got, as I say, gateways back open again, Danny, and that we're moving in the right direction with regards to our commercial operations.
So along those lines, before we go to Vincent, one of the questions was regarding Houston. Is Houston maybe one of those that you're thinking about for early September, possibly? Yes.
Of course. I mean, absolutely. Houston's a very important gateway for us, and will remain so in the future. And I'm very confident that we'll see that again operating soon.
Okay, thank you. Vincent, over to you. Could you just give us a quick rundown of your routes that are open, and then what you might see happening in the near future?
Yeah, of course. Thanks, Danny. So as I mentioned earlier, and just to reaffirm, JFK is now operating 4 times a week, Chicago 4 times a week, Washington Dulles is twice a week. And then again, from a North America perspective, we're also operating Toronto 4 times a week as well. So in how does that relate to our normal schedule? So the only destination, the gateway that's missing right now is LAX. We continue to monitor the opportunity to reintroduce LAX. And we'll do as soon as it's feasible. As Andrew mentioned, Etihad is built as, of course, a point-to-point carrier, carrying passengers into Abu Dhabi, into the rest of the GCC and Middle East, but also our network is built into markets like India, Pakistan, and the rest of the ISC. So with the restrictions that are in place with different countries, different governments, different border closures, as and when different markets open up, that will of course dictate how often we operate from some of these North American gateways, and how and ultimately the aircraft type that we're operating as well. We normally operate a 380 into JFK, a 787 into Washington, a 777 into Chicago, LA, and Toronto. However, right now we've changed the aircraft types. We're operating 787-9s into all of those destinations. Unless it's a charter aircraft, we have been doing some charter operations and continue to do those. Some from the UAE, from the US into Abu Dhabi. Some actually from the US directly into markets like Kuwait and India as well. There we may actually put 777s on. So if there are any opportunities for charter flying, we are looking at those as well as we go forward. Thank
you very much. We have to answer the question about COVID testing. It's come up from a number of people. We know that the UAE government has a requirement in place of a test, a negative test, 96 hours before check-in. One question, I'm going to ask it this way: is Emirates, getting that reliable test in the U.S. can be problematic in that time frame. Do Emirates or Etihad have have a referral basis for any of their passengers for where they might go in their various U.S. markets to get a reliable, timely test, or is that something you're not doing? I'm just trying to help a few of the folks asking a question here.
Shall I take it, Vincent?
I'll see what you say, and then I'll go.
Thank you. Okay, no, it's an important question, and you fairly recently introduced the requirement to have a PCR COVID test, negative test, from certain departure points in the US into Dubai. That then changed on the 1st of August to all passengers traveling either to Dubai or through Dubai, requiring a negative PCR test to have taken place within 96 hours of departure. What we do, and again, we would always recommend that check with your travel agent, check on Emirates.com, because, again, things change. But right now, in terms of the US, what we're saying is we are not referring, but we are saying that the test should be done by an approved laboratory or practitioner. And generally speaking, if you go through the CDC, you go then to state, and you then go to county, you'll find a list of, and through zip code as well, you'll find the list of practitioners in the area. And then it comes also, Danny, back to communication, as we've said many times, and we have to continue to do more and probably do better, but continue to push the message and to try and communicate as widely as possible through all channels that this test is required. Now, if I may, just to say one other piece on that, we realize this is a step, but we think it's a step that ultimately improves the safety, the comfort, I guess the security and safety of all of our passengers, and that is a benefit to all. So whilst it is an extra step for the time being, we think it's an extra step that, as I say, ultimately gives everyone a higher degree of comfort and assurances, and that at the moment is a good thing.
As Vincent said, and I'm going to use this in the future, it's part of the theater of safety, health, and cleanliness that we all have to adopt. And I want to re-emphasize for our viewers, this isn't a requirement that the airlines, have put on. This is a requirement from the UAE government. And from looking at the possibility of travel to other countries in the world from the United States right now, I have to say that I'm gratified that Americans can still travel to the UAE, are still allowed to travel to the UAE, just with this requirement of 96 hours. I think it's for some of us in the United States in certain markets, certain places, it's probably going to be hard to get that test within 96 hours. But that's also so much more a function of where we are in the U.S. with all of this right now as well. And we need to do our part in the United States to do better on this going forward. Vincent, did you want to add to that? Anything that Andrew said?
I think, Danny, just to reinforce what you've just said, this is a government requirement. It's not an airline requirement. And as such, we encourage our guests to treat this like any other government requirement, whether it's a visa requirement, an entry requirement. We will work with consumers to communicate in the right way, to actually provide call outs to customers in advance of their flying as a reminder that this is taking place. But ultimately, to Andrew's point, there is then a higher level of confidence, let's say, when a consumer is flying with one of our airlines, that they are getting on an aircraft where everybody has demonstrated that they have had a negative PCR test within a recent time frame. So that goes towards that whole feeling of peace of mind, of well-being, of safety on board our aircraft, and ultimately going into our destinations as well with Abu Dhabi and Dubai.
So we have some more questions that I'm going to entertain in a moment from the audience, but I have a few here that I'd like to get to also. First, let's do a couple of those and then come back to audience questions if I can. You all emphasized in both of your prepared remarks the importance of communication. Everyone in the world is approaching communications in a very different way post-March. With the advent of COVID, whether it's the Zoom calls like this, the more indirect methods of communicating, not the face-to-face anymore. You mentioned, I'm particularly interested in what you mentioned with regard to your staff internally. I mean, obviously, I've been the recipient of all of your communications externally to the business community and the leisure community. But how has this affected your communications internally? Just a word or two as a lesson learned for going forward with your airport staff, with your ground staff, with your onboard staff. What has this new world of communications that we've all had to adopt? What have you learned from that for going forward into the next 6 months or the next year? Why don't we start with Vincent this time first, Andrew, and then come to you.
Thanks, Danny. I think as an organization, we've always had a very open and honest communication from our executive team through all levels of Etihad and Etihad Aviation Group family. It's very, very important not to beat around the bush with stuff, because ultimately the communication that we provide, especially to our frontline staff, is how they're going to represent and present themselves and the organization to the consumer, to our guest as well. When things are changing so rapidly for the consumer, in terms of border closures, in terms of network flying, it's important that we have different methods of communication with our staff as well. Of course, we've gone through a period where we're also looking at how do we encourage people to travel again as well. And it's good to see that actually some of our staff have started traveling to destinations that have opened up out of the UAE, into the Maldives, into places like that as well. But going back to your original question, really it's about honesty, it's about clear communication. And as I said at the beginning, we've been making significant changes to our business over the past 2 years anyway. So those communication channels have been very open, very clear, and it is also now an expectation of our staff that those communications happen regularly and happen very, very directly. So our CEO has mandated that he will hold regular communications with our global teams, and that filters down through our Chief Commercial Officer, through our SVP for Sales and Distribution, and on the operational side as well. The important thing to remember for Etihad is we are still of a size where communication is very straightforward for us. So we cut out a lot of the fluff, let's say, and we're able to take communications directly to those frontline teams. So I think, as I said at the beginning, the fact that we've already been making significant changes, the fact that we've already had a very strong communications program, the fact that we've already been in the gym making these changes to get fit as an organization has actually put us in a very strong position throughout this pandemic.
Thank you, Vincent. Andrew, how has Emirates dealt with internal communication?
Well, I think it's been, on the whole, in a strange way, it's been a great opportunity, and a lot of positives have come out of the situation. It's clearly been very difficult for some more than others, and there's no escaping that. But I think in terms of communication, the way that we communicate internally, certainly key stakeholders. I mean, I've been able to have, I'll be honest with you, from a selfish point of view, time difference wise, it's not always easy. I've been able to have quite high quality conversations and meetings with my colleagues in Dubai, simply because when they're working from home, it's a little bit easier. The pressures and the time differences that we face perhaps lessened. And the technology has been so reliable. We've I think, robustly tested it, as they say, and frankly speaking, it's allowed us to have some very good conversations, face-to-face conversations, a bit different for myself being still relatively new in the US. So I've been getting to know a lot of people over, whether it be internally or externally, over Teams or Zoom or whatever other platform it might be. But actually, we've been able to have some good conversations. And I think we've also had a bit more, perhaps it's not that we've had more time, but some of the external pressures that are on you when you're in an office environment perhaps haven't quite been there. Certainly a lot of pressure, there's no doubt about that. But in terms of time pressures, it's perhaps been a bit easier to plan. So I hope we continue to adopt it. I'll be honest with you, our head office is always, for me as an outstation employee, a great place to go. It's an exciting place. You always just get a feeling that you're really part of something very big and special there. So, you know, that's an important part of what we do and should continue to be. But certainly the communication, and also with our trade partners as well, we have to realize, I think, that as we move forward, everybody wants communication to be a little bit different, a little bit more straightforward, a little bit sharper. And these platforms give us an opportunity to do that and to have conversations that maybe, you know, limit some of the complexities that we would normally have in terms of scheduling appointments in such a huge geographic area. You know, we have 12 gateways across the US. It's a lot of gateways, a lot of territory to cover. So I'm a fan of it. I don't think you can ever replace face-to-face when it's quality face-to-face. And I hope also that we've learned from this that when we do have meetings and we do sit around the table, we will make the most of it, because traveling will be, you know, will be perhaps a little bit more anxious for people, and people will take a little bit more time to decide on where meetings are and how meetings should take place. We're lucky, as I said with Dubai earlier, we're lucky that it's a great place to hold meetings, and we'll continue to support that message for sure. But I think good things have come out of it, Danny. I'm overall a fan of some of the learnings we've had, although frankly, I think we do need to get out and about and start having some face-to-face again as well, all of us really, just for our own peace of mind and mental well-being.
As I like to say, from your lips to God's ears, we all need to get out and have physical human contact again as soon as possible. Just to close the loop on a couple of the PCR testing questions. One question was, you need to have the results in your hand when you check in at the airport, and that's a true statement, correct? And the other question was, the results need to be 96 hours from when the test was taken, not from when the results were received. Is that correct?
It's correct on both counts. Yep.
Correct on both counts. Great. So we can close those questions out on that. If I could, we have some very, very dear friends on the line from Pittsburgh, Sumin Curtis from the American Middle East Institute, and my very, very dear friend Ruth Fry from CHOP, Children's Hospital in Philadelphia, and some friends from North Carolina. So there you have North Carolina, Philadelphia, and Pittsburgh, and they all want to know if there's any routes that might be opening anytime soon in a closer vicinity to their cities. I have to ask the question because they're my dear friends and colleagues. I leave it to you to answer, both of you, however you might like. Please.
Vincent, go ahead.
Yeah, sure. So,
I'll jump in.
Yeah. You know, let's keep the communication clear and direct. At present, no. But that's not to say that we don't constantly review opportunities in every market. And I think the key thing to mention here is that our network, as we went into COVID era, may not be our network as we come out, not just in terms of destinations that we may stop flying to, but also new opportunities that come up that present good commercial opportunity for that particular destination. So at present, no, but never say never.
Andrew.
So I think under normal circumstances, I mean, and it's a great question, and you know, our commitment, as I said, to the US is very significant, and we're always looking at ways to, if not operate our own aircraft into more gateways, it's to work with our partners. We have good partnerships across the USA, Alaska Airlines and JetBlue in particular, and that allows us to operate indirectly with our partner airlines to a lot of these markets that we would consider offline, although very, very important markets. And I think going forward, perhaps even more so, you know, we will all be looking at where can we get the most leverage from our partnerships? Where can we ensure that we're helping to feed the most passengers from from cities that we're not currently operating our aircraft to, and that's perhaps more important now than ever before. So what I would say is, whilst I think at the moment our focus is on our existing gateways, our focus is on making sure that we can operate our existing gateways in the right way and sustainably. Of course, I think in terms of the US, and I mentioned it earlier, the size of the US, you are always looking at ways to develop the feed and to give customers an opportunity, if not on our own aircraft, on partners through our gateways. And I think that'll be more important than ever, frankly, Danny.
If I could make a two-finger intervention on that answer on Orlando, Andrew, when any sense of when Orlando might reopen? That's a question from one of our viewers.
Yeah, that's a very good question. So, as with all of our gateways, we're very keen to open, whether it be on the West Coast, whether it be in the Southeast, or whether it be in Texas. And we're hoping it's one of Orlando will be one of the gateways that we announce in the near future. Of course, we're keen to get back into Florida. We're keen to support the community there. It's been great. It's been very good for us, and it's all sorts of different types of traffic. And we've been very welcomed there. So we want to be back as soon as we can. So again, I would say without commitment, there is no doubt that that's very much on our short-term plan, all being well.
Thank you. Let's pivot, if we could, to a little bit of conversation about two other topics, cargo and also medical. Emirates and Etihad were both instrumental coming right out of the beginning of the COVID crisis to immediately pivoting to be better cargo handlers, if you will, for the needs and requirements around the world for medical equipment and medical devices and PPE, and also in helping repatriate citizens both ways and medical patients. What do you see in the coming months with regard to your cargo and your ability to do more medical tourism and medical patient flights? Those two questions, if I could, for both of you. Why don't you go ahead, Vincent, and start, and then we'll go to Andrew.
Sure. I touched on cargo at the beginning, but cargo has actually been a very successful operation for us since the start of the pandemic. Cargo has always been a very strong revenue generator for the airline, both via our freighter operation and also in the belly of our aircraft, our passenger aircraft as well. Ultimately, what the cargo operations enabled us to do is to continue some of that passenger flying, where we have been able to fill the belly of the aircraft with cargo, especially coming into the US, and then using our road transportation operation within the US to get to secondary, tertiary cities within the country as well. We've worked very, very well with the DCM, Shema Gargash, the UAE Embassy in DC, and her team in terms of not just repatriation flying for UAE nationals from the US back to the UAE, but also looking at other nationalities. How do we put on charter operations from the US, from Canada, into destinations that are outside of the UAE? And as I mentioned, we've operated into Kuwait. We've operated a number into destinations in India. We've looked at opportunities into Pakistan as well. Charter flying, cargo flying, sort of go hand in hand sometimes because there's an opportunity to do both at the same time. But when it comes to medical tourism, again, medical tourism is not always as straightforward as it may seem. Yes, it's good revenue, but in terms of stretcher cases and things like that, it comes with its pain points when we're carrying stretcher cases. However, it's all about adapting, being fluid, looking at new business opportunities, and actually taking a step back and saying, not just focusing on cargo and medical, but where do we see different segments of our business bouncing back? Which ones are going to rebound the quickest? And where is our focus on those segments in terms of communication, pricing, distribution? And I think, you know, what we haven't touched on yet is what do we think is going to happen with the corporate segment, with business travel? And with a lot of the studies that we're seeing, I wish I had a crystal ball that could tell me what's going to happen in the future. I don't. But ultimately, I think business travel is one of those segments that's going to come back a little bit more cautiously. Yes, people are are getting a bit more used to Zoom calls, to Teams, to all these online video conferencing tools, but ultimately nothing replaces face-to-face communication. But for now, as I said, we're a key operator from the US into the Indian subcontinent. We see that there are big leisure segments, pent-up demand coming from those segments, whether it be friends, relatives, families wanting to travel back to visit each other in each country. And as soon as we can get a better idea of what's happening with the borders reopening in India, I think that will actually better serve us when it comes to saying, how do we put on more services? How do we increase capacity from existing services? And how do we add on new gateways that we're not currently operating as well?
Thank you. Andrew.
Yeah, well, possibly just picking up on Vincent's last points with regards to pent-up demand and what we think might be out there. We do believe that there's still a huge amount of repatriation that needs to be done. We think that's happening now, and I think that there's still a lot more that is ready to go. A certain amount of tourism, but relatively low level. We think corporate traffic, and even IATA this week have come out with quite a positive response to their most recent survey in terms of the readiness of corporate travelers to get out and do business. And I think that despite all of the great technological platforms, people still do want to get out and do business, and we're obviously very happy to support that. So that's a good sign, and I was happy to see now. I think people are becoming more comfortable with the idea of travel, and I'm a firm believer in, travel is what I do, and I'm a firm believer that it's part of the human spirit to travel and to explore, and I'm confident that we will get back to that point. It will just take longer than we perhaps might have liked it to. To touch on medical tourism, yeah, of course, very, very important. It's always been very important, especially between the US and the UAE, and previously where I was in Singapore as well. Very strong market for medical tourism. And I'm quite sure that will continue. At what pace, to what levels is very difficult to determine at this point. We, as we know, are working off a very different set of rules now that used to be that we compared to previous year. We've had this approach as we continue to bring capacity and seats to the market. We then compare against where we were last year, and that kind of model is a little bit more challenging nowadays. So we'll be looking really at a different kind of measurement, but all sorts of different target groups. And the US is, for us, fantastic in that respect because there are so many different segments of travel. But Vincent's right. You know, the big traffic flows, the big Indian subcontinent traffic flows remain very, very important for us. We saw before the pandemic very, very good traction in terms of Dubai, UAE, Africa tourism, higher end tourism, higher value tourism, and we think that will come back. We believe that the hotels will be ready for this. We're certainly ready on board for this. So we believe that people will reach that point where there's a high level of comfort. Just to touch on this, because I have to get this in, Danny, and I know you'll allow me. In terms of passenger comfort, we very recently introduced our COVID cover. So we're offering COVID cover within a ticket price now. Anything purchased, I think. It's currently travel until the end of October. You will be covered if you are tested positive for COVID in terms of quarantine costs, medical costs, repatriation, etc. So again, when it comes to levels of comfort and trying to increase that, we've taken a fairly significant and unique step in that respect. So it's broad, Danny, in terms of recovery, in terms of distribution, in terms of the target groups that we're looking at. We won't be looking at the levels, the volumes just yet, but we'll be talking to all of those target groups because to some degree we believe people are ready to go. And we think also there's a certain amount of peer pressure involved as well when it's, people are traveling and competitors are traveling, competitors are flying, peer pressure on us, but also when competitors are traveling and doing business, there's a bit of peer pressure as well. So we think that eventually that will kickstart corporate travel, but of course very different. Travel policies will look very different. Travel managers have very different jobs now, and we have to help them with that and support them through that process with communication, with protocols, etc. So very different landscape going forward, but still opportunities out there for sure.
Thank you very much, Andrew. I want to ask each of you to walk us through the customer experience from arrival at the airport to arrival on the destination airport. But before I do, I have just one quick question I want to cover from cargo. One of our viewers is asking that just to reassert that your cargo packages are handled to all safety standards to avoid any COVID spread among the cargo and the packages. And I think you guys are rated as some of the highest in the industry right now, both of you in that regard. Is that correct?
That's correct.
That is correct. That is correct. And if Vincent will allow me, I must say, because you did, of course, ask about cargo. And when I was giving a list of colleagues that I have huge admiration for, cargo colleagues will fall into that category. They've done amazing work over the last few months. We've carried unprecedented volumes of cargo, emergency cargo, of course, very valuable and critical cargo around the world, using very smart, using our capacity and our aircraft as efficiently as possible, but also adjusting the network on a regular basis, making sure that we're reaching out as far and as wide as possible with our cargo operations. And it's really been, I have to say, very impressive to watch. And as I say, big thank you and credit, I think, should go to our cargo colleagues for that.
Yeah, I echo that, Andrew. And Danny, at the beginning, I mentioned, several destinations, new destinations that we've operated to. I mentioned Cuba. We've been operating cargo into other new destinations like Costa Rica, other Central and Latin American countries that we wouldn't normally go into, but also some unique places as well. It's been well publicized that we've operated a number of medical cargo operations into Israel as well as many other existing destinations as well. So cargo is going strongly, and where we can combine that with our passenger flying, it makes the commercial viability of our network that much stronger.
Okay, thank you. Now, we have 10 minutes or so left, and in 2 minutes for each of you, I'm checking in Washington Dulles to fly to the UAE for the first time in 6 months. Let's just say it's going to be the end of August here or early September. What is going to be my passenger experience? Will I be seated socially distant in the business class cabin? What am I gonna, what are some of the things that I'm gonna face in my customer experience as I travel, checking in at the airport and getting off at Dubai or Abu Dhabi on the other end? Andrew, why don't you go first? 2 minutes.
Okay, all right. Well, there's two ways to answer this. So if you're checking in DC, for example, then the one thing I have to say is that we will work always with the local authorities. So the airport authorities, local state regulations, rules, etc., will apply. So again, if you're traveling and you want to know about masks, gloves, etc., then you need to be checking those regulations as well. So we will always follow those procedures to ensure your check-in process is socially distanced, to ensure that masks are being worn, and this is in place in all of our gateways throughout the security process and the process through to the gate, and then the boarding process, which will go the last row first, and then bordering, so that you're staggering the boarding process, staggering the gate process. But I must say, it is two clear distinctions. So if you're leaving the US, our protocols may be different. They'll always be to the highest standards that we can achieve, and that working with our partners will help us to achieve, whether it be the local airport authorities and the ground handlers, whoever it might be, and to ensure that we're achieving the minimum of absolute security. In Dubai, of course, we're able to control the process end to end. I mean, even here, if you're in the chauffeur, if you're using our chauffeur drive service, then you'll be in a COVID secure, hygienically treated cars, so that if you're in business class or first class, would be getting that service anyway. And then, as I say, through the airport, tends to differ a little bit in terms of the authorities that you're working with. But in DC, you would be treated as securely as possible. So social distancing is in place throughout the process onto the aircraft, staggered boarding process, last row first, masks on board. You get a hygiene kit that you're given on board. So it has a mask, it has gloves, it has sanitizer. And as I said before, the process on board, once you're there, Danny, and you're relaxed and you're able to say, okay, I'm on board now, in terms of the personal protective equipment that the staff would have, cabin crew. We have a cabin service assistant on all aircraft now and all flights now, who's cleaning on a 45-minute basis, I think, throughout the aircraft. So meal service has been adjusted to ensure that there's limited contact, but you're still getting a service. You're still able to enjoy the onboard experience and in-flight entertainment. As I said, in Dubai, if I may, I know I'm taking up more time, but in Dubai, of course, we're able to control that from an end-to-end perspective. And also because we're transiting, we want to make sure that transit passengers are also in that secure bubble as they go through the airport, whether they're arriving in Dubai or whether they're transiting on. So, individually it can change from airport to airport, but from an Emirates perspective, it's only ever about having the highest protocols and the highest safety standards in place.
Thank you, Andrew. Vincent, similar situation on Etihad?
Everything Andrew just said. But Danny, if you were traveling with us, of course, you would have spoken to one of our wellness ambassadors pre-flight, and you would have real peace of mind that you're about to fly out of IAD on a great service, secure, clean, sanitized. But you would arrive at IAD, similar to what Andrew said, very different depending on different airports, but the social measures that are in place, the distancing measures are in place at all of our check-in desks. Temperature screening is conducted. If somebody displays some level of fatigue, dry cough, shortness of breath, any of those symptoms, they will either be denied boarding or they will be referred to the local health authorities for further checks before we accept them for travel at this stage. Again, similar to what Andrew has said around Dubai Airport, when you are arriving in Abu Dhabi, all of the social distancing measures are in place. Again, our wellness program is mirrored by the team at ADAC in Abu Dhabi for all arrivals and departures. On board, we are applying distancing measures on the majority of our flights. We are allowing families and relatives to sit together in the same row in economy. In our premium cabins in business and first, social distancing takes place automatically by virtue of the configuration of those aircraft. And actually related to that point, what we have seen is a number of our corporate customers actually who have economy travel policies looking to see how they can actually incorporate and negotiate an upgrade to a premium travel deal where they would have traditionally traveled in economy, looking to see how they can actually get some of their key executives now traveling in business or in first for that matter as well. So they get that social distancing applied by virtue of the configuration. There are also...
Well, you opened it up there, Vincent. I imagine a number of our corporations on the phone are going to want to be in touch with each of you, with you, Vincent, and you, Andrew, to renegotiate their travel policies as a result of that.
My line is open and ready.
Okay. One question I have and I promised you both at the beginning I wouldn't ask you to make projections, but there's a question that's come through here a couple of times on the screen about Expo 2020, and obviously that's been delayed and is now scheduled to kick off on October 1, 2021. And question just for your crystal ball, if you will, if you think that we'll be at a place and travel will be at a place where folks from around the world will be able to come and visit Expo. And are you as corporations thinking about that time when your loads will be back up to sort of some levels of what might have been in the past? That's just a question that's come through a couple times on the screen. So any comment about Expo and how you're dealing with Expo going forward?
Okay, I'll take that one. Well, I'll be honest, from a personal point of view, I think it's a good thing that we have now. We have longer time to build up to it from a US perspective. Not that we didn't have a long time to build up to 2020, of course, but I think we're going to take the positives from it. It's going to be a fantastic event. We are all very excited about it. I've seen the site myself. I've been there before the pandemic, and it's like nothing you've seen before. It really is going to be a stunning event, and I will do everything I can between now and Expo 2021 kicking off to support that message and to encourage the US market to visit. As I say, I think it'll be a wonderful experience, and I'm absolutely certain that by then, I mean, even now, I'm quite sure the protocols would be very, very sharp and tight, Danny. But I think by then, we'll know so much more, we'll have so much in place, regardless of what we know about vaccines or otherwise. I think that in terms of the understanding of the virus, but also the understanding of what protocols are necessary, it's a huge pot, it's a huge site, it runs for 6 months. I mean, this is a great opportunity, and I'm equally as excited about it as I was before. As I say, perhaps more so, because from a selfish point of view, I have more time to talk about it and build up to it. So very positive. Whether our numbers are where the original projections are, and you did say you wouldn't ask the projection question, but I think it's a fair question to ask. None of us have a crystal ball, but as I said earlier, I'm an optimist in terms of travel and human nature, and I think people will want to get to Expo. I think it will be a wonderful family experience. I really do. I think it will be unforgettable. So we'll do everything we can to encourage people to be there and to support the event. And I have no doubt that the protocols that were in place will reduce doubts and concerns to an absolute minimum.
Vincent, since I let Andrew answer the Expo question, I'm going to try to end here on a happier note and ask you about the work you've been doing on some exciting sporting projects with regards to UFC Fight Island in Abu Dhabi and the New York Soccer Initiative. Give us a minute update on Etihad's work in those areas, and then we're going to give it a wrap here.
Yeah, of course, Danny. And it's actually nice to talk about something that's non-COVID related. So DCT, Abu Dhabi Departure of Culture and Tourism, have done a phenomenal job over the past 2-3 months of working hand in hand with us and really demonstrating how Abu Dhabi Inc. truly works together to get the right messaging out globally and to encourage the right travel, the right types of travel back into the UAE as well. So well publicized recently, DCT, Yas Experience and Etihad worked with the UFC to actually put 14 charters on from different places around the globe, from Vegas, from Sao Paulo, from Moscow, from London, bringing fighters in to a quarantined area on Yas Island in Abu Dhabi to hold a series of UFC fights and challenges within a very safe quarantined environment. So that was great. And then, as you mentioned, on the sports side within the US, we have great partnerships with Monumental Sports, with the Washington Wizards, with the Washington Capitals. Great to see both teams up and running again with their mini tournaments in Florida. But on the NYCFC side, we've been working with the New York Mayor's Office and with NYCFC and Adidas over the past couple of years to bring to life 50 mini football fields around New York City, the 5 boroughs. So these are generally in underserved communities where we can bring the life and the passion of soccer into these communities for young kids. And we've continued to keep those open and continue to open new ones. We just opened a new one in Queens, a new one on the island of Manhattan last week. And the goal is to continue another, I believe it's another 5 by the end of this year, continuing into next year with that program. So things don't stop. Yes, we may have stopped flying as we once did, but our commitment to sport, our commitment to the communities within the US continues in full throttle.
Thank you, Vincent. Andrew, Vincent, we're at the top of the hour. If I missed anything that you have one sentence or two that you want to reiterate or restate, please do so now. Either one of you.
Well, all I would say, Danny, is that I think it's a fabulous opportunity. And thank you again for giving us the chance to speak to this audience and to everybody for joining. I'm just checking some of the questions. I know there are questions out there we haven't addressed. If there's a way that those can be addressed or sent to us and we can address them another way, we'd be very happy to do so. You know, it's an opportunity for us well, for me in particular, for people to see me and those people I haven't met that I maybe should have met by now, I'll hope to meet soon. But as I say, if there is an opportunity to address some of the questions we haven't, Danny, then we'll be happy to do so.
My team will take the remaining questions and we'll make sure that you all have them and have the folks that ask the questions and their contact details, and that'll be a good opportunity for you to engage with those folks directly as well. Vincent, any last words?
Just the last word, say thank you both to you and to Andrew. Yes, we are competitor airlines, but we both aim for the same goal, to drive business, tourism, commercial opportunities into the UAE and beyond. please, all of you on the call, come back, start flying again. Our great sales, ops, cargo teams are waiting to see your faces behind a mask, but we're eager to see you on board our aircraft. So thanks for your time today.
Thank you both very much. We're going to have a webinar when we come back for business in September on the hospitality industry writ large. We will have Jumeirah, Marriott, Viceroy, and Rosewood, 4 of our key hotel partners in the UAE, US business environment on and Andrew and Vincent, starting with the CEO's webinar that we had, soon after the pivot. My goal and objective is to have the 2 of you on, or have key representatives of your airlines on a regular basis to give us updates. I think this is incredibly valuable for all of our business members, partners, and friends in our network. So I want to thank you both very, very much for today. And I want to also thank you for what you and your airlines are doing to help try to reconnect us all and get us back to work coming this fall. Thank you so much, everyone. I hope you enjoy your day in the UAE, your evening in the UAE, and your day in the United States. We're dealing with the remnants of a hurricane here on the East Coast. So everyone, please, please stay safe. With that, thank you and take care.
Thank you all.